is your kung fu? What do you think of when you hear kung fu or gong fu? Google defines the term kung fu as any activity that requires patience, time, and energy to master. So I was thinking about this yesterday, Friday, because I'd like to be prepared when we go into this. I like to have a quote set up. I like to have kind of a topic that we're going to talk over. And I didn't have anything. And I sat down Thursday night, and like Thursday, I like to be all squared away by Thursday night. And Thursday night is the night that generally I'm by myself for a couple of hours because my wife takes the kids and they go to class. And that's usually my time. Like I make dinner, I listen to music, I plan it out a little, that's the deadline.
Right.
So I sat down Thursday and I was just wiped. And I had my open notebook. I had dinner on the stove or in the oven, and like I'm going to sit down because I should have had it done like Monday or Tuesday, but that didn't happen. So Thursday's the day. And I sat down, and it was nothing. Like the tap was it was wide open, but nothing was coming out.
Ooh. And
it wasn't writer's block per se. I just didn't have any juice left. There was just that orange had been just squeezed dry, right? And so I'm like,
that's a good way to put it.
And it was like bumming me out hard. And so I was just like, okay, forget it. Scratch that. I got one more day to prepare. And if I have to, I can prepare Saturday morning because I wake up early. But I got at least 36 hours. And so Friday rolls around, and Friday is my longest day of the week, which sucks because it's the last day of the work week, And so I'm scrambling to get things done, and just kind of in the back of my head thinking about all of this. And I'm like, well, what is Kung Fu? What's the actual definition of Kung Fu? And I've read that definition before, previous podcasts, but when you look something up on Google, there's really no telling if you're going to get accurate information.
Correct.
Unless you have time to verify and cross-reference things. And so I called Randall Davis of Kung Fu Conversations.
That's
podcast.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. He's my resident Kung Fu expert, right?
So and you called him.
I messaged him first because he's in Colorado, and the time difference, and he works some odd hours sometimes. So I called him, or I texted him, and he's like, well, give me like 20 minutes and call me. So did my thing, gave him a call. And he went in depth. I wish I should have recorded the phone conversation because it was really good. And basically, he described it as if you are a chef and let's say you make French cuisine, that's your Kung Fu. If you're a piano player and you're playing the piano, that's your Kung Fu or Kung Fu. And he was so eloquent in the way he described it that I'm not doing it justice. But it kind of set me down this rabbit hole of what we think of Kung Fu, and according to him, that term only came into existence with a certain short Chinese American that came over to San Francisco about 50 or 60 years ago, Bruce Lee. Before that, Chinese martial arts was wushu and praying and mantis and all of these different styles of martial arts, and they were specific names and specific brands of martial arts. And according to him, that it was basically put under this umbrella term of Kung Fu by Bruce Lee. Now,
interesting.
I don't know if that's 100% accurate. He believed it to be pretty close to to the thing. And I kind of think of it as like a, Kleenex. There's the Kleenex brand, but that's what they all get called, depending on what tissue you use. It's a Kleenex, right?
Hey, hand me a Kleenex.
Yeah.
It's like the Equate brand or whatever.
The umbrella term for that. But it was just really interesting that that term and the definition of that term I found really fascinating. And partially because of what we've done here. Like we don't... we started out as strictly just martial arts and talking to martial artists. And then as we've tapped into that well and found other people, like we've had doctors, we've had video gamers, we've had psychologists, physical fitness guys, Bill, all of these different things, but we're still after the same thing. Just the road to it is a different path. Does that make sense?
That does.
Like I tell people that like the martial arts thing for me in doing martial arts is my mental health. Like this is what I do, so I feel normal. So I feel like a human being. When I don't get to do that, I get depressed or grouchy or
pent up.
Yeah. Like my wife says, I go through withdrawals. But yeah. So like, and I know like you make movies, and I would say in this definition, that's your kung fu as well as martial arts, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. So my question is, did the words kung fu exist in the Chinese language beforehand?
That, I don't know. I don't know that. That would be interesting. That would require some more Googling, I think, but or knowing somebody that really knows the Chinese languages. That's a good question, though. I think it must have somewhere, I assume so.
It's so interesting because kung fu, meaning acquired skill.
Yeah.
Right? That's
something that takes time and patience and energy to master.
To do. And so like you said, if you're a chef and you are that's your kung fu.
Yeah.
If you're a health guy like Bill, that's his kung fu.
Yeah. So I know we have people that listen that don't necessarily practice martial arts, but pose that question to yourself. What is it that makes you tick, that makes you work at? What's something that you're working at? I personally have to have something to work on or work at, because if I don't, I'll go mad. Mm-hmm.
Like they always say, we, especially guys, we need something to be doing. Like we need a project. We need something to be chipping away at. You've got the guy sitting outside the gas station who's doing nothing, but in his rocking chair, rocking back and forth. He's got the knife and the piece of wood, and he's whittling. He's whittling away. I mean, that is like
keeping your hands busy.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the older I get, the more I appreciate acquired skills.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Especially people that have spent their lives doing something and acquired a skill. And if you're in your 70s or in your 20s, you're still practicing kung fu, but the person in their 70s is probably a lot more advanced in whatever their kung fu is. Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. Well, I've never seen the David. I've seen pictures of the statue.
Yep.
But like the definition of that, like just in the feet, you could see like the ligaments and the bone and and the skin, and it's just as smooth as polished glass. And like Michelangelo, right? That's the one that carved the David. Michelangelo, I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he didn't just wake up Monday morning and was like, I'm going to carve the David. He probably made some crap work there beforehand. That wasn't just like his first attempt. It took time and effort and many, many hours of learning how to do such a thing.
And like you said too, I remember reading something similar too on I think it was the same statue, but how on the statue of David, how there's certain tendons and muscles in the way he sculpted the forearm of David was only able to be possible by somebody who had actually studied anatomy.
Yeah.
That much.
Like it's all positioned in the right spot and everything. Yeah.
Like I think they went even so far as to say that the way his hand was being held activated a certain muscle in the arm that only that muscle would, or that group of muscles would have been activated that way.
Yeah.
And so he
if
really
your
studied
hand was
it.
in the correct position.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you're holding your arm out like this, your bicep isn't activated. It's more so your tricep. Right? Now you're flexing, your bicep's activated. I mean, that's a huge example, but something similar. And so it was, if it was Michelangelo, I'm beginning to
don't question.
Okay. He had to spend time chipping away and with his little chisel and his hammer and whatever tools he had, but he also had to hit the books too.
Yeah.
And he had to watch people and how their body moved too. So it was and observing and all, which was passive learning.
Yeah.
And then, or probably active learning, and then getting in there and moving his hands.
Well, and the other thing too is it couldn't have been done unless he did it.
Exactly.
Right? Like he didn't just talk about it or read about it. He actually did it. He probably messed up, truth be told, a handful of times. Like, oops, I got to start over again.
Chipped his nose off on that one. Like, whoa, okay.
He sneezed as he's hitting with the hammer.
Bring in another block.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was like my big thought for the day there. Like, what is your, what's your kung fu? Is it martial arts? Is it painting? Is it cooking? Is it being a mechanic? There's vast topics that you could go down on that, but which kind of got me down this whole rabbit hole of thinking and stuff. And earlier in the week, I was talking to a customer, and we make a little small talk, and then I hit them with the sell, right? You always got to break the ice somehow. So it's always like, hey, how you doing? Or what are you doing this weekend? Or, got plans, that kind of thing. And so
that's your kung fu.
Sales 101, right? So, nothing. What are you doing this week? Well, I actually have something next weekend to talk about. Normally it's just probably teach martial arts and do a podcast, and it's the same old rigmarole. Well, this week, this next coming week, me and Hunter, my oldest, are going to Portland to the martial arts seminar. And so I was all excited about that because I had something new to talk about, not just the same old broken record, and tell him about it. And this other guy who was listening, who was working, he's like, oh, you do martial arts? What kind of martial arts do you do? So I tell him, Wu Ying Tao. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, kung fu? And I go, huh? You're familiar. He knew I was speaking it's actually a hybrid of Cantonese and Mandarin. But don't correct me on that. I go, are you familiar with it? And he goes, no, I've never heard of it, but I practiced Wing Chun when I was younger. I was like, that's awesome. I've always wanted to try some Wing Chun, and I'm getting the opportunity, hopefully, knock on wood, this coming weekend, I'll get some Wing Chun in. And the conversation ended there, but my brain kept going because I've been asked, well, what martial arts do you practice? I'm curious, how do you describe it if a stranger asks you about Wu Ying Tao, and what is Wu Ying Tao?
I'm like you. I will kind of feel the people out, and if I think they know anything about martial arts, I'll adjust accordingly. And usually it's done like that, real quick. But it's, I'll be like, they're like, oh, you do martial arts? I'll be like, yeah. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And I say, Wu Ying Tao. And they're like, oh, what's that? And usually the first thing I say is, it's very similar to Jeet Kune Do and or Krav Maga.
Okay.
Even though I've never formally studied either of those, I've read books on both of them. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, and I can tell I'm like, yeah, they don't know what I'm talking about.
They're being polite.
Yeah, they're being polite, and usually
that is a nice shirt.
Usually, exactly. And then usually I'll go. So I'll say that, and then whether or not they understand those two references, then I'll be like, oh, it's a martial art. It was developed in the 60s in Portland, Oregon. And
so you give them the definition.
Kind of a little bit. And then I'll be like, it means no form way, or the formless way, the invisible way. And I'll be like, usually the next thing I say is, it's a real practical and dirty way of fighting.
I like that. I really like that. That's good.
I usually use the word dirty. It's real dirty. I say, we're not all about fancy, flashy moves. It's
not flashy. It's fairly straightforward.
And we have those fancy, flashy moves, but they're not really as much practiced as like our other techniques.
More straightforward stuff.
Just straightforward techniques. And I'll be like, look, we have a lot of dirty tactics where you're stabbing someone in the eye with your finger.
Yeah.
You're kicking someone in the groin. You're hitting them on the neck. You're slapping their ear. Like, you're hitting them in the rib. Like these really sensitive areas. And I'll say, our stance is very basic, and it's very much about ending a fight. We're not so much about like, oh, here, we're going to square off and then we're going to see what each other's got. Like we do that in the dojo sparring.
Yeah.
But streets, it's not flashy. It's like, bam, done. Finish the fight.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible, assuming you've done everything else.
So my definition
what is yours?
Was very similar to that. And has been. Like, I don't think I've ever described it any other way. It's basically like, if you're familiar with Krav Maga or you're familiar with Jeet Kune Do, it's very similar to those styles, those, not tactics, but that type of aggressiveness, that type of style. Yeah. That way, that process. But the more I think about it, like it's very much an American style.
Yes.
And I think what I'm going to do is start telling people, and it's kind of silly, but it's American Kung Fu.
No, I like that.
And
I like that a lot.
That it is, because it's a melting pot. We've taken style, we've taken stuff from over here, we've taken stuff from over here, and we've kind of put those things together. But the guy who developed the system and the style was an American.
Yes.
And America has always been described as the melting pot, right? Like we throw in, because we have people from all over the world that come to America. And that's basically what somebody did here along the way, right? They're like, oh, hey, look, I like that. I like this. I like this. This is all going to mix together and make some really awesome stew, And so that's what I think I'm going to describe this as.
American Kung Fu.
From here on.
I like that.
Yeah. Now,
that's your contribution, like your initial contribution to say, like, you're changing the way we describe it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we borrow a lot of stuff. And I don't know, maybe like I really hope Joe Turrell is at this seminar, because if he is, that's one of the things I'm going to ask him.
You're going to ask
like
him.
Not permission so much, but more like, hey, what do you think? Is this? I have so like I would pay a lot to sit down one-on-one and just be like, I'm going to pick your brain until you like fall asleep or tell me you can't think anymore, and just like fire off question after question on that guy.
Get some answers.
Yeah. And a lot of that stems from, because you started Wu Ying Tao when you were like, what, 12?
No, I started when I was like 5 or 6.
Oh, okay, much earlier than
yeah,
I did.
and I didn't stick with it very long.
Yeah.
A couple of months.
So I started when I was about 12. My brother was 10, yeah. And, I was super excited about doing martial arts. And like, when you're a kid, you tell everybody everything, right? Like, oh, I'm doing this.
Look at this move that I can do.
Yeah, I'm playing baseball. Blah, 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 blah. But, so I was all fired up, and I remember at school, different kids practice different things, and, they're all like, oh, I do Taekwondo, or I do, and so like all of these names that are known, that people know about. Well, in the late 80s, early 90s, Wu Ying Tao had pretty much was on the decline there for a while, unless you were in Anderson, California, or as far as I know, but not very many people knew about it, and they just kind of look at you like, well, what is that? And as a kid, you're, I don't know, and it bugged me that I didn't know, and so like I always wanted to know, and when we finally like got back into training, that was one of the things, and that's still one of the things that Blaine Sensei Court talks about, is like knowing your history, knowing your lineage, knowing what it is that you do. And I don't know if it bugged him enough or if he's just a history nut. I think it's more along the lines of he's a history nut, because he's, he wants everyone to know like what came before you.
Yep.
And that's really cool.
That is, yeah. Yep.
That's one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about him and his method of teaching and stuff, and like where this came from and where the roots are.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's something we constantly, we have new kids and adults coming into classes, usually a steady inflow and an outflow. People try it and then they move on. But we're always constantly hearing it in class, like, okay, what does Wu Ying Tao mean?
Yeah,
okay, who's your teacher? Who's my teacher? Who's his who's his teacher? Your teacher's teacher. Mm-hmm. And it's constantly repeated to where you really get to learn it. And I think Blaine Sensei Court, he said one time, he said actually a couple times, that he would ask other kids that did other styles and they wouldn't know anything about their style. They're like, oh, I do X style. Yeah. And you're like, oh, what's that?
Where did it come from?
Where did it come from? And I don't know. I don't know. I just do it. That's just how we kick. And to know the roots of it is pretty cool.
And, on the flip side of that, I don't really think there's anything necessarily wrong with not knowing.
Sure.
As long as you're doing something and you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You don't have to know the history of it. But it's for me, I think it's nice to know. Like, it's like I know where my family comes from. Just a sense of like purpose, sense of being, just having a little bit of knowledge of like, oh, I came from here, or I learned this thing, and its history is here. That to me is cool. I like history though. There's some people don't care; they just want to punch and kick stuff or grab, whatever. Right. But. I think it's to each their own, right?
It's a natural byproduct. I think eventually you want to find that stuff out. If you don't initially so much are interested in it as much. Yeah. It's like a byproduct, I think.
Yeah. And the more in depth you go with something, some hobby or some passion or whatever, like the more encompassing it becomes. Like you got to find out every little nook and cranny about this thing,
Yeah. Like, and that's why I think when I describe Wu Ying Tao to people, and I say, "Oh, it's like Jeet Kune Do," and I'm like, "Do you know what that is?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, so it's Bruce Lee's style that he invented," and I'll be like, "Well, our founder of Wu Ying Tao, he's still alive, and he actually trained with Bruce Lee up in Portland, Oregon, and when Bruce Lee was developing his style of Jeet Kune Do, and our grandmaster, the founder, Bruce Terrell. So I have to be like, okay, Bruce Lee, Bruce Terrell,
two different
people. Our grandmaster of our art is he was training with Bruce Lee, and that's why both styles are very, very similar, because they were both exploring concepts. As I understand it, they were exploring concepts together, or whatever. I don't know the extent of their relationship as far as. And hopefully you'll be able to find some of that out. That's the nooks and crannies you want to know.
Yeah, all of those little details.
Hey, C. Joe. So, how was it to punch Bruce Lee?
Yeah.
How'd it feel like to get punched by Bruce Lee?
Yeah. That would be cool. Hopefully that gets to happen.
Yeah.
Sooner than later.
Yeah.
But. Yeah, so like that it's funny to me that our stories have been similar as far as like how we describe things to people.
Yeah.
As far as martial arts is concerned. But you had said something a minute ago, and the nooks and crannies, and like
the nooks and crannies.
You were doing that with the cameras here. Before we started recording, you were like, okay, we need to make sure, you were all telling me about like separating the frame of the camera into 3 sections, and like how
thirds.
Yeah, you need more space on one side than the other, otherwise it looks like you're talking to a wall, and all of that stuff. And I was like, this, not knowing anything about movies and filmmaking and things like that, I could tell that was something that you were into. And if I had never met you before and just heard that conversation, I'd be like, oh, that guy's really, he either knows his stuff, knows nothing about it. That's irregardless. He is into this. Because like you could be into something but be totally wrong about it, right?
Yes.
Car guys, like if you know about cars, and you like have read books on cars, and you've studied automobile history and things like that, there are certain things that you just know. Okay. And then there are certain things that like you can spot somebody who doesn't know as much, because they'll say something and you'll just be like, that's wrong. But
yeah,
you be you, buddy. Well, yeah. Like, okay, for example, the first iteration of the Camaro, okay, there was multiple. You can get like an SS, which is a super sport, an RS, which is a rally sport, or a Z28, which was an engine option. You can have an SS RS, which an RS was just like cosmetic options. SS designated a package that you could buy, but you couldn't get an SS Z28 because those were 2 different engine options.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but like that was one thing that I always like I knew. And when you talk to a car guy, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's a SS Z28," you'd be like, "Okay, you don't know what you're talking about." But not that you would like, not that I would say that to somebody. I'd just be like, "Oh, interesting."
Yeah.
Later on, they totally threw that rule out the window in like the early 2000s. They had an SS Z28, but the first iteration, 67, 68, 69. I'm showing my nerdiness here now, but yeah,
can tell you're into it.
Yeah, well,
I'm now. Go ahead.
I was for a long time.
I'm now the guy going, oh yeah, that's right. And you're like, yeah, Tyler doesn't know anything. Not about Camaros.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, but it's interesting because like I could tell that like this was something like not knowing anything about cameras, very, very, very little. I could tell right or wrong that you were into it. Like you knew enough, like you were passionate about it. So I was like, okay, you know what you're talking about. You take the floor. So important distinction, so we're not both, butting heads. Like I let you take the lead because like this is like what you care about, right? So, boom, there you go.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Sidetracked.
No. And there's people that I know that are Christians that they get really into like reading Bible history and this person came from this thing and this person came from that and this person was raised in this type of environment in the Bible and like all the nuts and bolts and the nooks and crannies, like you said.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting here thinking, and I've never really cared about any of that stuff. Like as a Christian, I just don't care about any of that stuff.
Well, how microscopic do you need to get?
Yeah. And some people love to do that. And I appreciate they'll spend hours and they'll get up, I hear in church, this person, the pastor will get up on stage or somebody that's lecturing knowledgeable that they'll get up on stage or in front of people and they'll be like, oh, this person in the New Testament did the same behavior as this person in the Old Testament because they were in the same area but just hundreds of years apart, and that tradition survived throughout that area. Whatever, I'm kind of making this up, but and I'll be like, oh, that's fascinating, and then I'll just be like, yep, I just don't care to go study any of that. Like, so I totally agree. That's funny. Like,
but
stuff.
Yeah,
like,
no,
you were talking about. Some people, it's okay to not want to know the nooks and crannies of your martial art.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I would imagine somebody who that's their job, like they're the leader of a church, they're a pastor, or they're a historian.
Well, some TikTokers.
Eventually, like you're gonna get down to like, hey, I discovered this new thing.
Yes.
I read this thing, and that translates to this, and I just found that out because I've read this book 500 times.
Yes.
Whereas the layman or the practitioner of the church, maybe they've read the Bible once, maybe they've never read it. So like as you get into something and do it over and over again, you find all of these other little things. And maybe we're at the point that we're at now because we've been doing that for so long.
It's a natural byproduct. Like I said, it's a natural byproduct of eventually you're going to want to find out about those things. I mean, some people, but maybe some won't.
And you discover things differently.
Yeah. Correct.
Because you're looking over here and I'm looking over here. We're doing similar things, but we're in different areas of that thing.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating and to see how people really get into their things, like their activities.
Yeah.
I mean, people that do tie flying for fly fishing.
Oh, yeah.
And they can just take a fly and make them all different types of sizes and different colors with different feathers and just all that. And that's just, man, I just don't care about any of that. But a lot of people do. And it's a great kung fu, right? For them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great, I've seen people tie flies.
Yeah. And it's a skill. It is an art.
It's
absolutely
definitely a skill, a learned skill.
And I appreciate that somebody can just do that.
Yeah.
And be so into it. And I think like you said, my thing is definitely film making. Mm-hmm. That's my jam. Not so much post-production, the color correcting and the editing and all that stuff. But I'm getting better at all. But but mine is more like the camera setup and the angles and the crew and the story of how a story is told. That's what gets me like, yeah. But
and seeing how that works out, like we set this camera up here to see this reaction and this thing and what's the MacGuffin and all of that stuff. Like I remember the first time I watched Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
And when they opened the briefcase and he's like, "Are we good? Yeah, we're good." Da, 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 da. I almost ignored the rest of the movie because I was like, "What's in the case?"
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And then you never find out.
You never find out. And I had to watch the movie again because I was like so preoccupied with what was in the case that I like completely lost the plot of the movie. And I don't necessarily know that movie has a whole plot narrative, running through it, but like I had to watch it again because I ignored the rest of the movie because I was like, well, what's in the case? Are they going to go back to the case? What,
That says a lot about you that you got stuck on the one detail and you missed the whole rest of the film.
Well, it does appear in a couple other scenes.
No, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
But they
it
don't
does.
open it. They don't. I wanted to see what was in it.
That film is. So, the screenwriting class that I took in film school, just a little side note, my professor, Scott Sublett, he wrote a book called Screenwriting for Neurotics. It's a great book. It's a great beginner's book on how to write screenplays. Screenwriting for Neurotics. I think it's on Amazon, a couple other places. But we'd get to the point in our screenwriting class, which is usually about a third of the way through. And someone would ask Scott, so Scott would be talking about story structure, and you've got, okay, this happens, then this happens, this is how a good story happens, and the characters in their normal world, and then in their whole normal world gets flipped upside down, and now they're in this whole other world, and which launches them into the adventure, essentially. And then we'd go through story structure, and I even remember the guy that raised his hand, and he's like, well, so what about Pulp Fiction? And Scott Sublett didn't even miss a beat. And he's like, so this, and this is how he talks. He goes, so this is about the time in the semester when people start asking about Pulp Fiction. And so he went through it, and there's actually a story structure to Pulp Fiction. It's just switched around.
It's cut up. Yeah.
It's cut up, but even in its cut up form, there's still a story structure that's somewhat traditional to it. And I haven't seen the movie in years, so don't ask me to do it. But anyways, even though it was all cut up, it still makes sense.
Yeah.
And that just a testament to how much of a kung fu person Quentin Tarantino is when it comes to stories and movies and storytelling. Like he just wrote just that. I mean, there's been nothing like it since, really. Many copycats, but nothing like it.
Yeah.
But anyways, little side note. Like for you example, you are really into I would actually say you're into martial arts like way more than I am. Like you really, like you show up to class today, you show up, you've got all these techniques you want to go over, like things that they're not something that I would be interested probably on my own. But then because of your enthusiasm, you're like, oh, this, that. Like, oh, we're going to do this duck and slip and all these moves. And I'm just like, yeah, Dustin's really into this. This is cool. Like it's inspiring.
It is. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because of all the effort you put into it.
Well, I want to engage people.
Yeah.
And like,
and that comes
I don't
through.
know how else to do that, but to try and excite them with something. And I like to think about stuff like, okay, if you write a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have a problem, and they try and solve the problem in a nutshell, right? Or this thing happens to them, and they've got to figure out a way around it or over it or through it. And I look at like, whether you're sport fighting or fighting to defend yourself or whatever, is a series of problems. And like, how do you solve each one of those problems? And then for every problem you get, there's usually another problem behind it. So if I solve this problem now, hopefully I can have the tools to solve the next problem. And it's a series of like hopping from one problem to the next problem and trying to solve each one of those. So how do we do that? How are the different ways to do that? And I was actually
That's your kung fu.
Yeah, I was really hoping that Sensei Joe was going to be here today, but he had some other things to do, because I wanted to ask you and him, like when because you guys were both in the military, and in a nutshell, like when you plan an assault, like I don't know if you've ever been a part of that or anything like that in your guys' military history, but like in training, I'm sure you planned things and ran scenarios and stuff. But if you plan an assault, I was listening to a guy talk about it, and he was talking about planning he was not a Green Beret.
Ranger.
He was a Ranger. And they were going to do, and it's actually a historical thing, they went and tried to rescue POWs from Vietnam. It was a fascinating story. They didn't find them because they had the
POWs.
The people that held the POWs.
The Viet Cong
got inside. They got some. They found out that this was getting planned, and so they moved them at the last minute. But he was talking about planning this assault on this prison, and how he planned it was like flipping it on its ear by saying, okay, if I was going to defend this position, where would I put myself? Where would I put the guard tower? Where would I put, counter snipers? Where would I put all these people? And then he just like planned for that. And I was like, okay, is that the process, or was this a unique idea for this guy? And I don't know. I've never been in the military. I don't know how to plan for an assault. I've never assaulted anything, like I don't know how to do that. Do you have any experience or any knowledge of that?
A little bit.
Is that the step one?
So I didn't get very high in the ranks.
Yeah.
Highest I ever made was E5 sergeant, and that was when I was back here in the States. So a lot of the operations and missions I was on, I mean, all of them really, I was just at the bottom of the
You weren't in the planning
I wasn't in the planning. I was
Yeah.
just the one executing it. And a lot of times you just didn't know what you were executing. Sometimes you just knew what you were doing, but you didn't know the whole big picture, just being a lower ranking person.
You get a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, piece of the puzzle. But being in a lot of briefings, our leaders would they would say, okay, well, we've got intelligence that the enemy over here has, they've historically had these types of weapons, or we got word that more weapons are flowing across the Pakistan border into Afghanistan and getting distributed in this area. The enemy in this area has historically been using this type of explosive for the IEDs, and they're historically putting the IEDs in this area, or specifically using these tactics like putting them in a culvert that you drive over on the road, or putting a pile of rocks around them on the side of the road. So there was like lots of trends that they would use. Like there was a lot of similar things, kind of like what you talked about, that assault, the POW rescue mission.
Yeah.
So
like you had points where like, this is what we're looking for.
Like, this is like,
be aware of this.
Be aware of this, but I mean, it can all just go sideways in an instant. And so you just got to, I mean, it's like that Mike Tyson quote, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And so, but you go in with a plan. And so, refresh my memory. I'm trying to stay on your question.
When you plan something, do you plan it from from like if you were in the other boat.
Yes.
Like if you were trying to plant IEDs.
Yes.
And you as the soldier are looking for IEDs, do you go, oh, that's a good hiding spot because I would hide one there?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. But they'll even take it a step further, and they'll be like 2 or 3 or whatever steps down that road, and somebody really smart might look at an area and say,
that's an obvious spot.
That's an obvious spot. So somebody may think that that's a spot. Like point A is an obvious spot. So that American soldier might look at that spot and be like, oh, that's the obvious spot. And they're going to look there. But instead of, we're not going to put a bomb there, we're going to put it a little ways away from that spot. So as they approach that spot to check it out, they get blindsided on the one side. And they might even do that, who knows how many ways down that line of like, okay, now we're going to put a secondary, like, okay, a smart person would look at point A and be like, that's a spot for a bomb. An even smarter person would be like, whoa, hold on. Okay, yeah, but now they're trying to trick us. Now, oh, look at point B, and then but the bomb is really at point C, which is by point B or something. So, I mean, any type of variation. And then it's just at that point, it's like you get lost in the complexity of like how many steps ahead. And then you just got to be like, okay, we've got 4 spots here that like they could be at,
yeah, everything at a certain point, you just go, everything's a bomb.
Everything can be, and it could just be, it's just buried in the road, and
you drive over.
You drive over. It happens all the time. And so you're planning these ops, and you just do the best job you can. You just look at the terrain. You say, okay, the high ground's over here, so we've historically been ambushed on this side from this hill, and then you go from there. And then, so that would be a really good question for Joe, because he was in charge of leading missions on his bridge inspection missions in Afghanistan, I believe. So that'd be a really good question for him, because he was the leader of those missions, whereas I was more totally separate mission, totally different deployment than him. But yeah, I was just more like the person executing the plan.
That brings up another point though, because you said something about like how you were the one executing it, but you didn't always know the whole story. Like you didn't know the whole plan, right? You knew, you probably got an overview of it, but like the nuts and bolts were more minute. Like your job was X.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Your job. Like there was definitely briefings like saying, okay, guys, we'd get the platoon together and say, okay, we're going to drive down this road and this is what's going to happen. But a lot of times then there was smaller instructions delegated to other individual people.
Or to groups.
Yeah, and to groups. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that we had this other group was on the other side of the mountain doing this, and maybe my squad leader knew it or my platoon leader knew it, but somehow that information didn't trickle down to me for whatever reason.
And it probably didn't need to all the time.
And sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. It's you just sometimes don't need all those people to know. Maybe only the lieutenant or the platoon sergeant needs to know that this unit's on the other side of this mountain doing that thing. And so, but yeah,
I would imagine, like, depending on the scale of the job, like if you're all close by, you have to know where everyone's at.
Yeah.
So you eliminate friendly fire.
Yes.
And if you're on the other side of a mountain where it's impossible for me to possibly shoot you, then it really doesn't matter so much.
Yeah. And I was just using that as an example.
No. That was perfect, because as a layman who knows only what I've seen in movies, in read on military stuff, which isn't a whole lot, but on the reading part. But it's good to get that perspective, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was a fascinating thing to hear from the ranger on this interview, was like how he planned it out. And they had a group of them that were all planning this out, and like how they're like, oh, well, if I was in charge of this, this is where I would put, the guard This is where I'd put a sniper. This is where I'd do this
Yes.
right here. And so then they flipped that and was like, okay, well then this is what we'll do, that kind of thing. And it was really like, oh, I was like, I've never thought of that,
Yeah.
I've never had to plan an assault on a building. So I don't know I don't know the first thing of that, but it was cool to see like, that's the depth at which you go. And then like in class today, planning and like talking about slipping and moving off to that side and trying to get to that blind side of the person, for however brief time that period is, like that's where I want to position myself. And it just kind of all
Flow.
but it all like rolled up in this ball of like stuff. you know?
Yeah. No, those definitely, we definitely did that type of stuff. And you definitely say like, there's a couple stories I have, it was just that it was, we think they're gonna do this, and then what's our weakness at that point,
Yeah.
And so like you look at us, our platoon, from the enemy's point of view, the Taliban's point of view, and so that's really good, and that's such a valuable thing to do. Like I do it all the time now with martial arts. I'm like, okay, where's my weaknesses? Like where, like, and I'm genuinely honest about it. Like, where are the holes in my defenses? Where's the holes in my offenses? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really valuable to do.
For sure. Well, it's just, like targeting. Like, we were talking about that earlier today.
Yes.
Like when you first learn something, your target is like the entire head.
Yeah.
And then as you move on and grow and learn, like those targets get smaller and smaller, and they multiply some cases,
There's like 30 targets on someone's head.
Yeah.
10 on their face.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what was the original subject we got off on that?
Oh, so we just, my favorite kind of podcasts, actually.
Yeah. Well, we got on that rabbit
one topic, and then we just go down the rabbit hole. What's your Kung Fu?
No, I remember that. Yeah.
And what is your definition of Wu Ying Tao?
Wu Ying Tao, no. One of the other things to bring it back to what we were talking about, one of the things that I describe to people is I'll be like, this style, Wu Ying Tao, it's a very aggressive style. Mm-hmm. It's not this. I forgot to say this.
Yeah.
It's not, our style is not somebody punches you or punches at you and you block. Ours is a block and hit at the same time, at the very basic, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I would say,
like if somebody's hitting you, you're hitting back.
That's how I would probably describe it. Like it's not I don't want it to be an even exchange. It's not going to be, if I can help it, it's not going to be an even exchange.
Yeah. And I'd even take it a step further, and I would say my definition of Wu Ying Tao that I would add to that is I'm not even going to wait sometimes for them to throw the first punch. And this is me, Tyler's opinion. If I get the feeling that somebody's going to do something, preemptive measures. That is me. I'm not speaking for the entire
and you're
art.
Not a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not speaking for the art, and I'm not speaking for anybody other than me and my opinions. So do not take this as legal advice.
There's an MMA guy. Oh, I can't think of his name right now. He's pretty popular. He's retired MMA guy, but he was talking about dealing with bullies.
Yeah.
And how it's weak to wait for them to throw the first punch. If somebody's threatening you, deck them. I can't remember his name. It's hilarious. He has a whole bunch of stuff like this. He did He did the reality show, the martial arts one, Ultimate Fighter.
Okay.
Did you ever see the Ultimate Fighter?
Parts of it, yeah.
That's actually a really good show. A couple of those seasons were really good. He was on one of the first seasons, and there was a thing where, because he was a coach, and the other coach, they had fought once before, and they had a little animosity. And he was talking about, there was a scene where they like almost get into a fight. I think.
Oh, I know. It's Chael Sonnen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sonnen. Yeah. And they were talking about, he was talking about that particular instance. He's like, that guy came into my range and I was going to hit him.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to wait for him to throw the first punch. And I'll have to find the clip and show it to you, because it's great.
I know what you're talking about. He pushed the guy
back
and said, "I cannot allow you close to me."
Yeah.
As he pushed the guy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool.
If you get any closer. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot allow you. And then they went at it. You know, I mean, the one guy he pushed didn't respect that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's how you describe it.
That's Tyler's description of Wu Ying Tao.
Your definition.
Definition. Preemptive measures. I have an article I saved from, I think it was a Black Belt magazine. It's in my my karate notes binder, where I take all my notes, and it's by John Hackelman. And
I'm not familiar.
John Hackelman. I'm not so familiar either, but I know I think he was the founder of The Pit.
Yeah. Okay.
And so somebody asked him a question, something in regards to if somebody hasn't touched you yet, is that something to the effect of like throwing the first punch type thing.
Okay.
And it was like, well, they may, and John's response was, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, it was, they may not be physically assaulting you yet, but they're emotionally assaulting you.
Okay.
And so he said, it's only a matter of time until that emotional assaulting or verbal assaulting goes into physical.
Yeah.
And so that is a intensely debated thing, right? That is an intensely debated thing, and an intense personal opinion, I would say, on that.
Yeah.
My opinion falls in line with that. Not legal advice.
Well, and it kind of bears the question, like, how long do you wait? If somebody scaring you, like, to me, that's a big red flag. Like, if you all of a sudden jumped up and were scaring and be like, hey, you're making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be uncomfortable. Like, fair warning. Something bad's going to happen,
Yeah. I mean, you take it. Yeah, exactly. And your family's there, your wife and kids, your parents.
Exactly.
Then they're there. I mean, how long are you going to wait? And then I would even go so far as to say, okay, a similar situation would be like, okay, somebody walks into a store, and let's just say in California, they walk into a store here in California and they've got a shotgun, right? And they're carrying a shotgun over their shoulder. Mm-hmm. Well, you better believe your hackles are going to get raised on that, right?
Yeah.
That might be normal in Texas. That might be normal in Montana, but here, and if a person starts getting loud or boisterous, I mean, is somebody really going to wait until that person starts shooting to shoot them first? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, unfortunately, the law it's debatable, but right, you get defense attorneys and prosecution. But I mean, if somebody starts getting loud and boisterous, like, are you going to wait till they start shooting?
Yeah.
I mean, they start waving that shotgun around, like.
It just got turned down, but the laws for self-defense were like, they were trying. Somebody was trying to change it here in California. The definition of what self-defense was. And
yeah.
I think they lost support or something, because it went off the books, as far as I know.
Huh. No, but I mean, I know those are two different things, right?
And, yeah,
firearms versus a fist fight or a self-defense situation. But I mean, somebody has a knife and they pull out a knife and they may not be trying to stab you, but they're
not cutting cheese with it.
They ain't cutting cheese. I mean, like at that point, it takes some preemptive actions, and so that's, I mean, coming from a military background, I mean, you don't wait for,
if you hesitate, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
But that was one of those things like during COVID when everyone mask up.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't go to the bank during that time, but I can only imagine being a bank teller and like pre-COVID, right? If you were a bank teller and somebody walked into the bank wearing a mask, you're like looking for the alarm, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh crap, it's going to go down. Versus after COVID, everyone's masked up. So like, there's got to be alarm bells going off in the back of that guy's head or gal's head, like robbery.
Yeah,
But then you look around and it's like, everyone's got a mask. It's The first couple of days of that must have been a little wild,
a little hair raising. I mean, and I think that they would hopefully be able to flip a switch and say, okay, like I've got to adjust my
I've got to adjust
outlook.
My mode of thinking here.
Yeah.
But originally, like the first couple of times, that still had to be a little bit like, jarring. Yeah.
There was a situation that happened, oh God, like probably a year and a half ago, right outside our karate school here. I was walking and with someone and all of a sudden I heard this pop, and down the road here, walking from the Rite Aid right over here, walking through the abandoned, there's like a little field, vacant lot between us and Rite Aid, and there was a person walking through the field, and it looked like they were just lighting like fireworks and tossing them, just like, and there was like pow, pow, and just bang, and I'm like, well, one, those types of fireworks are illegal in California. Two, it ain't even around the 4th of July. And three, and then this person's walking right at us. And I was like, man, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure they're throwing fireworks, but I mean, I don't know. Do they have a gun?
Yeah.
And so I told the person, I was like, hey, get in your car. And they're like, what? Why? And I was like, get in your car now. And, I was like getting ready to be like, am I going to have to get my gun? Like, I'm not going to sit here and just like, and this person walked right through our parking lot.
Oh, really?
Right. I want to say right through our parking lot or on the sidewalk, but it was like one of those things. And I was watching them the whole time. And, right outside the karate school, and we're in a great spot too. We are in a good spot. So that's not a ding on
no. Yeah. We're not like in the hood.
No, we're in a very safe, clean spot, but that happened right in this area. And so I was like, man, I'm getting ready. Like this person's like,
you're aware.
I'm aware. Yeah. And ready to jump into action, take preemptive steps. But that's just me.
As opposed to sticking your head in the clouds and being oblivious.
And being an ostrich. Yeah.
Oh, that's even better. I like that.
The ground. Yeah.
I like that.
But
I think that's it. I think that's a good spot right there.
Friends, this has been you didn't do that at the beginning.
Oh my Lord, we didn't. This is episode 95. Oh my Lord, we just went right into it, didn't we?
You did. You went right into talking about the...
Well, that was episode 95 of the Formless podcast with Tyler the Superhuman and me, Dustin. It's constantly changing and evolving. We'll just go with that, right? If you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify. We have a Facebook, Instagram, and X account, Formless Pod. You can email us at theformlesspod@gmail.com. And we have a website called The Formless Pod. I think that's it. Right on. Until next week.